from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
I wanted to ask an economist this morning about this argument that Biden's plan is somehow going to increase inflation and cost the everyday American a lot more on their tax bill. Joining me is Dr. Julianne Malveaux. She is an economist. She's the former president of Bennett College, and she's currently the dean or a dean at Cal State Los Angeles. Good morning and welcome, my friend, Dr. Malveaux. Needed to talk to an economist this morning because all of these arguments about why this plan is bad, many of them center on this notion that somehow this plan is going to cause inflation to go through the roof. And before you answer that or tell us if that's true or not, help us understand what the Biden plan actually does.
Let's give Joe Biden a shout out. It's a step in the right direction. It's not as much as many people want it, but it's a good thing. It forgives, as you said earlier, $10,000 to anyone who has an outstanding federal student loan. This only covers federal loans, which are in the Department of Education's portfolio. So many people have other loans, private loans, etc. Those will not be forgiven. If you had a Pell Grant when you took out your loan, you'll get $20,000 worth of loan forgiveness. More importantly, Areva, and the part that people are really not focusing on, it changes the terms of repayment. So today, before the bill and all the regs haven't been promulgated yet, your student loan repayment was capped at 10% of your gross income. So you made 70 grand, you're going to have to pay 7 grand. And you would pay that for 20 years until the balance was paid off. Mm-hmm. Under the new plan, you pay 5%. So as opposed to the 70 grand person making 7,000, pay back 7,000, they pay back 3,500. Okay. And you only will pay it for 10 years, not 20. I actually think...
I'll stop you there, Dr. Malveaux. So great. So that means you have more income on a monthly basis because rather than having to pay out 7,000, you're paying out 3,500. So there's more discretionary income that you have, and you can go out into the economy and put money into the economy. But you said it also reduces the time period from, say, a 20-year repayment
to 10 years.
10. It changes it, but you're paying less money in a shorter period of time, so you're not going to pay it all off. What happens to whatever balance may remain?
The balance will remain. It'll be forgiven, actually. It will be forgiven. But look, if you look at it, most people, Areva, unless they have catastrophic things happen to them, most years your income goes up. Over a 10-year cycle, your income goes up. So I gave you the $70,000 possibility. That might be what a teacher makes in, let's say, New York or perhaps LA. That's about an average for a teacher there. Well, that teacher will be getting 2, 3, 4, 5% increases every year. So they will pay more than we're thinking they'll pay now if they're basically seeing income increases. Right. So I don't necessarily, let me just delve a little bit. What happens when people have these crippling student loans? It postpones their adulthood. You have people who are still living in their mama's basements. You have people who would like to buy a home, but they can't because they're paying back student loans. You have people who are in their 50s who are still paying back student loans who are thinking, well, what about my retirement? Right. We have people who are also thinking, I'd like to help my kids, but I can't help myself because I can't pay back my loans. But for young people who are maybe between, I say 25 and 35, it postpones their adulthood. They can't make adult decisions. Some young women are postponing, young married couples postponing having children until they get their loans paid down. So this is a good thing.
I'm glad you're making that distinction because, yes, there is this argument that's happening on the right that somehow everybody goes to college as a part of some elite class. And as you just said, teachers and nurses and people who do perform essential functions, even the people that serve you your coffee at Starbucks, many of them are college educated, and they are far from, this so-called elite, people who have trust funds and who come from wealthy families. And they're trying to lump all of these people together and suggest that the plumber is somehow different than the teacher. And as you just stated, many of them make the same amount of money.
Or the teacher might make less. Quite frankly, if we look at some of this, the dropping of Ivy League schools is deceptive. What percentage of all college students go to Ivy League schools? It represents less than 2%. Then let's talk about the number of Ivy League students, mostly not black or brown, who go with very little loan money because they're coming from very wealthy families. So again, they're the ones who keep comparing apples to oranges. Take it even further. 80% of the student loan relief is going to go to people who earn less than $75,000 a year. So again, this is not subsidizing the wealthy. People who earn less than $75,000 a year, what they're our teachers, there are nurses, there are social workers. Look at the federal or state, basically income salaries. You can find them easily. I have faculty members at Cal State who don't make $100,000, as people keep talking about. They make sometime between 75 and 90. So this is a deliberate attempt to foment class warfare and to paint these crazy Republicans as if they're victims, which they are not. I mean, Areva, if we really look at some of this, the Trump tax cuts, let's talk about those for a minute.
You read my mind. That was my next question.
$2.3 trillion forgiven. $2.3 trillion. We're talking about at max with the student loan forgiveness. At max, it'll be like $1 billion at max.
Now, let me ask you this, Dr. Malveaux, because I've read that the student loan forgiveness is $300 billion. Why does the number vary so much? You said $1 trillion. I've read $300 billion. I know economists, get to different conclusions based on their assumptions, but that's a wide gap. $300 billion to $1 trillion.
Well, the Congressional Budget Office actually says it's about $605 billion when you include loan forgiveness, the forbearance, and the income, the repayment. They say that the Congressional Budget Office, which is a politically relatively neutral group, and most people use their estimates. I've seen other estimates, but then what they say footnote is if other assumptions change, it can be as much as $1 trillion. And so there are always assumptions. I mean, what can happen? Inflation could go up, not for this, but what if inflation went up for another reason? Right now, Mark Zandi, who's one of the most, I respect him, very good economic forecaster, he says it will raise inflation by less than 0.8 of a percentage point. So, where
are the Republicans getting this talking point that this is going to raise inflation? Where is that coming from?
They're crazy minds, essentially. I mean, okay. When I was at grad school, I took a class, and the class was titled, "You Can Lie with Statistics." And basically, the professor, who at that time was a public policy wonk, before we had all these talking heads on television, he did a little bit of that. And he would talk about how you could take data and massage it to come up with the answer that you wanted. So basically, they want the answer that says it's inflationary because people are frightened of inflation. And especially right about now with what's going on with the Fed. Jerome Powell has been so, I don't want to say wishy-washy, but he's sort of priming the pump for we might have more inflation. He's already said he's going to raise interest rates at least twice more before the end of the year. And the last two rates of 0.75% were, many of us think, way too high. If he follows up with that 2 more times, that will be inflationary, but it won't be because someone got some forgiveness on their student loans. I mean, if you look at what people are doing, what people are going to get is a little bit of wiggle room. They're not going to get a lot.